Welcome everyone. Today we're going to go through a step-by-step guide on how to run an experiment locally on your machine. Now I'm going to assume that you have already followed my other guide on installing DeepRacer itself. If you haven't, please click the link above, follow those instructions, and then continue here. Alright, so now the first thing I'm going to do is spin up WSL2 and load up Ubuntu. So go to your DeepRacer for Cloud. Okay, so go to the DeepRacer for Cloud directory, and let's take a look what's inside. I'm going to assume that you're comfortable with Unix. If not, please leave me a comment. I can create a quick video how to use Linux if you want. But for now, you can just copy what I'm typing into the terminal on your machine. All right, so looking at the directory listing, you see there's a couple of files here, run.env, system.env, and the directory custom files. So let's go through these step by step. Custom files is where you're going to put your reward function and other important files related to your experiment. Run.env contains the environment variables you want for a particular experiment. And system.env has the global default values. All right, I'm going to go through these one by one. The first one we want to go to is custom files. Okay, let's go into custom files. And you see we have a few files here. The first one is hyperparameters. This is where you're going to set the settings for hyperparameter settings. The second file here is model metadata, and finally reward function. Let's go into reward function first. All right, I have the simplest reward function possible here. It simply returns the number 1. All right, and of course you can make this as complicated as you want, but for purposes of today, we have this simple reward function. All right. Now let's look at the hyperparameters. These are some custom. Actually, no, these are the default values. Something we may want to change later is the discount factor. It's currently 0.99. We may want to make that different. The other one that I often change is number of epochs. Usually I set this to 3. If you set it to a higher number, it just takes longer to run. Then I have it here for 9,000 episodes. Usually it never goes that long. And average score, 350. All right, let's, I'll make it a bigger number just to be on the safe side so it doesn't stop too early. All right, so let's quit out of that. And finally, let's look at the model metadata file itself. The model metadata file tells you what kind of action space you're working with. Right now, we're looking at a discrete action space. That's why we're saying you're seeing these things. Action space, the first entry here is saying set the steering angle to -30, the speed to 0.6, and so on and so on. This is a very slow car, as you can imagine. And at the bottom here is just additional information such as what kind of sensor this car is using, the neural network. We don't want to change these values. I think these are pretty much standard. What you want to change is the action space stuff, like all these things. You can make this simple or complicated. Keep in mind that you do need to have at least 2 entries here. If you only have 1, I think it gives you an error. All right, so let's quit out of this. Oops. And let's go back up another previous directory and let's look at the run file now. So this is where you set the values for a particular experiment. I'm going to walk you through which items you really need to change. So for the simplest way of training, I will show you the ones you definitely need to look at. In a separate video, I'll show you the advanced options. The very first thing you want to change is the world name, right? Every time you train for a different track, you want to update this. For March 2023, the track name is Arctic Pro. If you ever forget if you ever forget which one it is, you can always go back to the GitHub repo, DeepRacer race data, right? I showed this in the previous video. This month's qualifier is the Hot Rod Super Speedway, and that's Arctic Pro. All right, let's go back to the Ubuntu. All right, so in the Ubuntu screen here, you see that I set the world name to Arctic Pro. You do not add the .mpy. Let's scroll down. The next thing you want to change is this, where it says dr local model prefix. You can name this anything you want. I like calling it experiment 1, 2, 3 because I keep an experiment log. I keep track of all the different things I've tried, so I can keep track of what worked and what didn't work. I really encourage you guys to do the same. This is a brand new model, so we're not using a pre-trained one. So we're going to set that to false. In case you want to clone your model, you set this one to true. You would add the name of the original file, or the model to be cloned under this one, pre-trained prefix. And then the clone model would be model prefix. All right, hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, let's keep going down. So the next thing we want to take a look at are these items right here. Local, metadata key. This is the file name for the metadata file. As you can see, it's simply model metadata.json. That's the default value. The next one for hyperparameters is hyperparameters.json. And finally, for reward, it's reward function.py. Now, you might be wondering, why am I going through this? Well, later in the advanced setup, you're going to have a different reward function for every experiment. So you would have to change this line. So I just want to make sure you're aware of these 3 lines right here. These are very important to update. All right, let's keep scrolling down. So some of these options are for object avoidance training and head to bot. We do not need to use these right now. We only change the settings we need for time trial, but that's what we're training on. All right, let's keep going. Finally, if you want to view the training as it's going, meaning you want to see the camera, you want to see what the car is seeing, you would go to this port 8088. I'm going to show you how to do that later. In case you need to change that for whatever reason, this is where you would change it. Finally, DeepRacer workers is set to 1. This is a default value. If you have a basic computer, you probably, or a slow computer, you probably want to keep this to 1. If you have a powerhouse, let's say a Threadripper like I do, you're going to want to increase this, and I'll show you how to do that in a future video. All right, so that's basically it for the run.env file. Now keep in mind, you might see slightly different lines here or settings depending on what version of DeepRacer for Cloud you downloaded. Okay, next, let's go to system.env. This is where we set a couple of key environment variables. The one here, dr upload s3 bucket. This is when you're uploading to AWS itself, right? For now, we're not going to use this right now, but I just wanted to bring to your attention that when you're ready to upload the model, you want to make sure that the AWS bucket that you're using in your own personal account is typed in here, right? The ones that we care about for local training are the local S3 bucket and profile. We're using Minio. That's like the fake S3, the one that you run on your computer. So we're going to use the Minio profile, and we're going to save everything to a bucket called bucket. Again, you could change it, but there's really no point to change it. That's where we're at. Okay, so given all that, let's continue here. What else do we need to take a look? Whenever there's a new track that's released, let's say later in the year, there's a new track we've never seen before, the nice people at AWS community are going to release a new robo image. So you're going to have to update this as the season goes on, right? Right now I'm using version 5.08 CPU AVX2. So I'm using the CPU image to run the simulation itself. What else? I guess that's it. And then finally, the SageMaker version is here. SageMaker image 5.0. I have multiple GPUs, so this is why I have my own special GPU image. you can use the default one that comes with your install. It should be fine. If you do have multiple GPUs and if you're having trouble getting it to run, send me a comment and I'll create a video for that. All right, that's basically it. Let's quit out of this. So what have we done so far? We've reviewed the environment variables. We looked at our reward function, our settings. Let's start training. So what's the very first thing you need to do? You need to make sure that Minio is running. Now, I always have problems running Minio through the Docker image. It's been a pain for me, so I just basically said, you know what, forget it. I'm not going to use it. If you follow my install video, you would know that I do a custom install of Minio. I run it locally on my machine. So now is the time, if you decided to do what I do, now is the time to turn Minio on manually, and then we're going to do the training. So I'm going to go over to PowerShell. So let's go over to PowerShell here, and let's start up our Minio instance. So if you follow my other video, you know that you have to set the password, install it in a particular directory. And this is the part where we spin it up manually, right? So in PowerShell, take a look at the syntax I have here. We're setting the Minio root user as an environment variable. And the next thing I'm going to do is set the password. I'm using Minio admin for user and password. Do not do this. This is not a best practice, obviously. You should change it, make it something else, but this is what I'm using for demo purposes here. Now, the command to run Minio is the following. I use absolute paths here just to make it easier. I happen to install this on my X drive. You need to update the paths accordingly, right? So the command is minio.exe, server, and then the path to your directory, your data directory. Mine is in x/data/minio, but again, you have to change it to whatever you have. Followed by console, followed by console here, and console address, and then address. So if you do this, it's going to spin up Minio for us. Okay, so yeah, I'm running on the old version of Minio. It's 2 years old. Okay, yeah, you should update it. I haven't bothered. I'm the only one using this thing. It tells you what the address is in case you want to view it, and the password. And of course, it tells you, don't do this. Use a better password, right? And you really should. You really should use a different password here. This is not ideal. So if you want to test to see if this actually works, you can go over to the browser. So here I am in the browser, and I'm just going to enter in Minio admin, my password. I'm going to log in. I go over here to object browser. I happen to have 2 buckets, but most people only have 1 so I'm going to click on bucket, and I have all my experiments. All right. So this is where you can go and see if the file got loaded, right? You can always just go to your hard drive since you're running it locally. All right, let's go back to Ubuntu now. All right, now that we have everything running, the first thing we're going to do is activate the environment. So bin/activate, and I like typing in the environment file that I'm running, that I'm going to run. So right now it says run.env. So I type this in. I have to type in the password here. It's going to ask you for a sudo password for your machine. Okay, it's fine. Notice that it updated S3 Minio. This is not the one we're using, or at least that's not the one I'm using. I customized my environment to use my manually installed Minio. And I want to make sure, I just want to make sure you guys don't get confused by that. All right, next step. We always upload our custom files, right? This is an important step so that whatever changes you made locally on your hard drive gets uploaded to the S3 bucket. Yes, the S3 bucket technically is on your local hard drive too, but remember, there are 2 different systems. We're mimicking how AWS works in the cloud. We're mimicking that on the laptop. So we have to keep in mind of all these things. All right. So we copied the file from our custom files folder in this directory right here to an S3 location. So now it's ready for the RoboMaker and SageMaker images to use this. The next step is to start training, right? Oops. And I get a message, right? It's saying, hey, this bucket already exists. Yes, because I was testing it earlier. In case you get this, just do -W. Just make sure you don't delete something you actually want to keep. All right, so now it's running. And this could take a few minutes here to load up. All right, so just be patient. Okay, it's loading up. And let's just give it a few more minutes. So I'm keeping this in real time so you see how long it takes to load on my machine. It might take even longer on your machine, right? So, just be patient. What I like to do is I like to look at the task manager. So let me go over to, let's switch over to the task manager, shall we? All right, where's my task manager? It's here. All right, you see that it's kind of slowly ramping up. Just give us some time here. All right, still loading. If I go back to Ubuntu, you see I'm still waiting here for Doorman installing these things. So it's just still loading up. Now I always keep an eye. You see how it dripped? If it dips all the way down to back to 0% CPU, that means it didn't work. It dipped and then it's coming back up. That means that when you see this plateau here, that means it's installing and getting everything set up. It then dips and now it's at a new steady state. That means the RoboMakers are simulating the environment. Let's go back to Ubuntu and you see now that it's getting, it's showing you different training iterations popping up. Now, what I like to do is to pause this, Control Z, and do dr start viewer, or you know what I like more? I like dr update viewer. So you saw this over here. This is the weirdness that WSL does. I don't really like the terminal window in Windows. It's buggy like this. So if this happens to you, you just gotta deal with it, I guess. All right. So this says that it removed the old service, created a new one. Let's do FG forward to get back to the log file. And now I'm going to switch over to the web browser again. So let's go to the web browser and let me open up the viewer. So that's it. It's running. It's loading. You see it says experiment 1. The URL is 127.0.0.1:8088. And success. We got it to run. Now you can leave this running for a couple of hours, and then you can stop it. Let me show you how you would stop it. Okay, let's go back to Ubuntu. I'm going to just hit Control C to stop. All I did was stop the logging, right? If I do Docker PS, this thing is still running, right? And if I do htop, somewhere in here, sorry, I have 24 CPU, 24 cores in this CPU. So there's actually 48 different threads. This is the one worker, right? And you can see kind of a waste, right? I have all these other cores I could be using. Let me show you how to enable those other cores in a moment here. All right, first let's just cancel the training, right? So I'm going to hit dr stop training. And it's going to stop it now. All right, make sure you do this, otherwise it will continue running on and on. So you're going to see it actually keeps going for a little bit and eventually it will stop. All right, looks like did it stop? Well, let's double check. Docker PS. Nope, it's still running. Let me do Docker stats. Still running. Something's still running. There's one RoboMaker still going here. This guy right here. When is that going to quit? We need that to stop, right? In case it ever gets stuck, you can use the docker kill command and just kill it manually. That's a brute force way to just have it stop. I don't recommend that unless something's gone wrong, right? It's better to let it shut down gracefully. All right, so let's just do dr stop training one more time. Nothing found in stack. Technically, it should have stopped by now. And lo and behold, it's done, right? I have the Nginx. That's the web browser, the viewer that we turned on. And we have Minio, which again, we're not really using right now, but it still spins up. All right, that's basically it. So let's say you have a reasonably powerful gaming PC with multiple cores. Let's say you have 4 or more cores, maybe 8 cores. What do you do? Well, let's go into run.env, and you have db workers equals 1. Now this might be, actually check the system.env file. It didn't either one of these. I moved it into, I prefer having dr workers in the run file, because later I'm going to show you how you can have multiple different run files for each experiment that you want to do. And you can run multiple experiments at the same time. And sometimes you want to have one CPU for one experiment, or have multiple CPUs for an experiment, right? So this gives you complete flexibility having dr workers in the run file. I'm going to make this 4 workers. All right. So we change it to 4. Just save and quit. And you can use dr update env to update the environment variables. I'm going to upload the custom files just to be on the safe side. All right, nothing changed, so as you can see, nothing got logged as being uploaded. I just do this every single time just to be on the safe side. The last thing you want to do is rerun your experiment and be using the same old reward function you used before. Complete waste of time, right? So always do dr upload custom files in case just to be on the safe side. Now we can start training. It says the bucket exists. Oh no, that's no good, right? So here's what I recommend. If we're running suppose we're running a new experiment. Let's go into the run file, and let's change the name of the experiment, right? It's a lot safer to do that. So you're doing a new experiment, experiment 2, quit out of this, save it, and now dr update env, and now dr start training. Oh, sorry. I have a lot of experiments, so that's why it's giving me these errors. But anyway, now notice this, starting 4 workers. All right, now it's going to run 4 different workers. Again, you want to do this in case you have a more powerful CPU. It will go a lot faster, or it should go a lot faster. All right, now it's loading up. Let's take a look at our task manager. Oh, the CPU is a lot higher than before. We have a lot more to set up. Let's see if it dips again. A little bit more volatile. Remember the first time it was nice and steady. Now this is like kind of bouncing all over the place. Notice my RAM. Where is this thing? Notice my RAM went up as well a little bit. I'm rocking 64 gigs of RAM. I've gave extra memory to the WSL engine here. And look at it, boom, 100%. 100%. So we're doing a lot of multitasking here. If I go to Ubuntu, it's still loading up. This thing is taking a little bit longer than before. All right, let's see what happens. Well, we're at 112,000 handles, 4,700 threads right now in Windows. Believe me, if you want to do multiple workers, you should really go native Ubuntu. Just doing this in Windows with multiple cores, I mean, multiple workers, you're just punishing your computer. It's really, goodness. This computer I'm using is water cooled. So for me, it can handle it. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's also very silent. I can't even hear the fans right now, but your mileage will vary. All right, let's see what happens. Still going. Should be done by now. What is taking so long? All right, let's give it some more time. Let's take a look at our memory. Is it the memory that's messing up? Doesn't look too bad. I have plenty of memory, physical memory to go, so it shouldn't be thrashing the memory. Hope not. Okay, look, you see, we got the dip. Remember what I said? If it goes all the way down, it means it crashed. Oh, it was going down and it bounced back up. That means we should be training. So let's go to Ubuntu. Ubuntu looks quiet, right? Let's do this. Let's Control Z and do DR update viewer and FG to return. And let's go to our web page. And this is the old one. Let me hit refresh and check this out. It's actually training four different workers, and you can see them running in real time. All right, if I go back to Ubuntu, looks like the logs have cached up finally, and you can see how that's running. All right, that's how we make it, change it to four workers. Now you want to be careful of the settings so that you need to make sure that you have the right number of episodes and a couple of other settings to make sure that you're always evaluating from the same spot, starting from the same spot. You notice I started evaluating from over here instead of the starting line, which is back here. So we need to make sure we change that. Now, if you have any questions about that, you really should check out the DeepRacer for Cloud GitHub page, or Git pages. I mean, there's a DeepRacer for Cloud reference page that explains all the settings that you can, all the variables that you can change. And specifically, if I go to, the main page here, there is, if you scroll down, it says using multiple RoboMaker workers. This is what you want to click on. And it's going to tell you what settings you have to change, right? Num episodes between training is something you need to keep an eye on, right? So, for example, to avoid issues with the position from which evaluations are run, ensure that number of episodes between training divided by number of workers times the round robin advanced distance equals 1, right? You want to make sure this ratio holds. So the example is if you have 3 workers, you set num episodes between training to 30 and round robin distance to 0.1. Why is that? Because 30 divided by 3 is 10 times 0.1 gives you 1. That means that it will force the card to always start at the same position for evaluations. And you want to do that because otherwise your training is going to get very hectic as it evaluates the progress from different positions. You might be starting from a corner, from a tight turn one time, and another time you might be in a straightaway, right? It'll be really hard to know which model's actually working properly if you're constantly changing the starting position. So make sure you keep this in mind if you're using the multiple workers. All right, I think we're going to end it here. This thing is running. It's kind of slow. You might be wondering, hey, why is it so slow? Well, remember, I set the max speed to 0.6. So is it that your computer is slow? Not necessarily. It's that the car is slow. So it's going to go around the track really slowly. Now, you feel free to change the speed to whatever you want. You should be able to do this track easily at speed equals 1, right? 0.6 is just way too slow. But in any case, that's the default value, and that's why I was showing that to you. All right, guys, have fun out there. Good luck training locally. And if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop me a comment. Happy to help you guys out. There you have it, folks. Team Voltron. Stay tuned for more. Make sure to subscribe and click that like button if you want to see more of this content.